Hi, David.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Okay, how about yourself?
Pretty good. Welcome to Blogging Heads TV.
It is wonderful to be here.
No big deal for you, right? Because you do actual media with real
Well, if that's what you want to call it. Earlier today, I was on Fox News talking about the Dick Cheney mishap, and I was on with G. Gordon Liddy.
Oh, man.
Now, I don't know if you want to call that media or circus, but
we are not worthy of you, man.
I'm sure.
And then tomorrow, are you doing Diane Rehm?
Diane Rehm, NPR, Coast to Coast, and I also do a weekly show out of Washington called Eye on Washington with Garrick McGinty that's done out of the CBS affiliate here, and about 40 PBS stations in those cities where people are lucky enough to get it.
I can't believe you have graced us with your presence. Listen, although we're doing this Thursday evening, I may not get it posted until after Diane Rehm has run Friday morning. Although normally we would. So if that happens, what you could do is steal any insights that I have, and then it would look to the world like I've stolen them from you, okay?
That's fine by me. Yeah, I'll consider this going into the batting cage.
Okay. I'm just a machine that throws...
Okay, well, let me get a pen so I can write these down.
Slow fastballs. Okay. You ready with that?
I'm ready with that.
Also, you will have a taped recording of this, you realize.
Well, we hope so.
We hope so. I mean, we have had to cross more than one technological barrier to get to this point.
Yes, the problem of getting a Mac-based system to talk to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Now, my feeling is if we have bridged this Microsoft Apple Gulf successfully, then surely the world's peoples can come together and live in harmony.
Well, at least in the Middle East.
At least in the Middle East and possibly elsewhere. So. This Dick Cheney thing, the story has been going on for, 4 days now. I'm not ready to let go of it.
No, that was what we were arguing about on Fox, me and G. Gordon Liddy, who of course said there was nothing to it. I raised the issue. Now, come on, if Al Gore had shot a hunting buddy while he was vice president, don't you think on your radio show, Gordon, you would have talked about it for at least 3 or 4 days?
For years.
Years. I mean, in fact, they'd have people on tying it to Whitewater, Vince Foster, and God knows what else.
There might be a UFO angle if Gore were involved.
Or global warming, perhaps.
Yeah.
but the thing, I mean, to me, I don't want to sound overly conspiratorial about this, but there still are some questions that linger, as people in our position like to say. Whatever happened with what was that deal with the cops? The sheriff's deputies.
Yeah.
They showed up on their own because they heard an ambulance had been called to the Armstrong Ranch, and then they get there and they randomly say, thank you very much, we have everything under control, we don't need your help.
Well, without ever speaking to Cheney, right?
Yeah, they don't even know what's happened. They're not even told there was a shooting. And think about it.
Oh, they weren't told there was a shooting?
No, they as far as I understand from the AP TikTok that came out yesterday, they heard there was an ambulance. They heard there was like a hunting, maybe a shooting mishap, and they came there and they were told, "Hey, everything's under control. You can go home. We don't need you." And think about this: Dick Cheney works for the chief law enforcement officer, really, in the country, and he doesn't even invite the guys in for a beer.
Well, I think beer would have been a poor choice of beverages.
Not even Chablis, whatever they want.
No, I think anything with alcohol. I mean,
Red Bull.
To me, actually, alcohol is the big serious question here because
right.
I mean, here's my logic: is like, okay, I was saying this to Mickey on yesterday's show. If this is you or me, and it's a hunting accident that puts somebody in intensive care, the cops are going to show up and they are going to talk to us right away, and there's no way we're going to say, wait, could we just do this tomorrow morning? And they'll say, sure, we don't really, whenever's convenient, okay? There's no way that happens, but it happened in this case. They didn't talk to him until the next morning. Now, there's no way that was their idea, right? I mean, they would love to meet the vice president. I mean, they weren't saying, we don't have time to talk to you. The initiative had to come from Cheney's end, the initiative to wait and not interrogate him until the next morning. Well, so you've got to ask yourself, why did he not want to be interrogated?
Well, wait a second. Someone's calling me on my cell phone. They don't like what you're saying. I'm just going to hang up on them.
Yeah, do that.
Okay, there we go. They're gone. And I'm going to turn this thing down, which I should have done earlier. See,
I just ignored my my wife on call waiting. There may be a price to pay for that.
Uh-oh. I'm sure a big price.
That's
nothing that flowers can't take care of, though.
Yeah, well,
no, but
have to
I
meet my wife sometime.
But you're right. I mean, even Jay Leno was joking about this, a day or two ago. He was talking to Kevin Eubanks, and he said, Kevin, if you go in the hood and the cops come in looking for someone who might have been involved in a shooting, can you, they say, where's Jamal? Can Jamal say, well, I'm kind of busy now. Check back with me tomorrow morning? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And listen, the whole argument that Cheney and Catherine Armstrong have made is they were just so concerned with Harry Whittington that they didn't focus on anything else.
Yeah.
Well, if you're that concerned and the cops show up, you can say, hey, keep an eye on this guy for us or something. And the other thing that didn't make any sense, again, was in the original Associated Press TikTok, was that according to Catherine Armstrong, who was brought out to be the spokesperson on this, no one official for Cheney, that when they got back to the lodge about 7 p.m., they ended up having dinner. She claims there was not a single conversation about what or how they should tell the public or the press about this. Now, you tell me, you're sitting around, the vice president has just shot somebody, and no one says,
Yeah,
what do we do about this? Who do we tell? What should we do about this?
It doesn't seem like a story to me. I can't imagine the press being interested.
No. Well, the other argument that they made that was interesting, this is what Cheney said to Britt Hume on Fox News, of course. And he was, he said, quote, it was a complicated story. We want to make sure we had all the facts straight before we told the media anything, which is why they waited so long. Very considerate. Complicated? He shot a guy. I mean, this isn't like health savings accounts.
Well, they had to get that hunting protocol point down, where it's the victim's fault because there's something he's supposed to yell.
He wasn't wearing orange boxers. I mean, it was just the orange vest.
But, Britt Hume, this is an interesting question. Did you see the interview, or I kind of glanced through the transcript?
Yeah, I saw parts of it, then I read the transcript.
Seems to me a serious journalist has got to probe into this question of why did they not interview you that evening? Whose idea was it that they did not, and what was the motivation behind the idea? Did he get into that? No,
that to me was a surprising thing.
Surprising it was Fox.
Well, but nevertheless, he asked him about the drinking. I mean, he didn't, it wasn't a total softball interview, though it was very deferential and respectful. But to me, that was the key thing that was missed.
Any good journalist
would have said,
because that is the big remaining puzzle. And to my mind, alcohol is the only answer. Now, it may be. Cheney apparently said he had a drink after the accident. So you can...
he said he had one at lunch.
Well, Mickey said that he also said he had a drink afterwards.
Oh, gosh knows. He probably was doing shots. Maybe it was a wake. Here's to Harry. But
well, anyway, that is the one... That's the one loophole I can see for him, is that... Yes, it was because he realized he had alcohol in his bloodstream that he didn't want to talk to the cops.
Yeah.
But it was alcohol that had entered after the fact. Now, the trouble with that one is I think, look, this guy is a professional politician. I think his mind is working as, after he recovers from the shock, which it takes about 5 minutes, the guy is thinking about all the angles. He knows the cops may show up, and it's hard to imagine him putting a lot of alcohol in his system after that, but who knows?
Well... It does seem clear to me. It doesn't take a lot of imagination or a lot of cynicism to think that they try to figure out how to play this, and that they maybe even entertained the notion of not saying anything for a while.
There
is. I think I have it here on my desk. In fact, I do. I'll show it to the camera. There you go. Texas Health and Safety Code, Chapter 161, Public Health Provisions. Subchapter E, Reports of Gunshot Wounds and Controlled Substance Overdoses. Any physician who attends or treats someone with a bullet or gunshot wound has to immediately report the case at once to the law enforcement authority of the municipality or county in which the physician practices or in which the institution is located. Most states have laws like these. It's not uncommon. But I wonder if they thought for some reason that either they could get someone to take the fall or they could just sort of have him treated. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked, and Harry would be out within a day or two. But at some point, the attending physician has to tell the deputies. At some point, the deputies find out. They come. They're told to go away. But then later in the night, there is a conversation. Apparently, there's an ex-sheriff who worked at the ranch Who then again talked to the current sheriff or the current sheriff.
He was working at the time as a security guard?
I'm not sure he was working there at the moment this happened, but he was employed at the ranch in some capacity.
Yeah.
So there was another conversation between him and either the current sheriff or the current sheriff's deputies. So it just could be that there was just too much that was beyond their control. Then they realized, hey, we're going to have to do this. Let's lowball it and, just tell the local press and, see what happens.
Which was smart, because then that turns into the local press is going to be, either she knows the reporter or it's going to be some gullible reporter. Either way, she gets the story exactly as she wants it there, and then that's the version AP picks up, and it goes national in that form.
Yeah, exactly right.
But so I guess those are the two scenarios. One is that they actually thought they could keep it quiet forever, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The other is, I'm not letting go of this alcohol scenario, man.
No, well, that would be... unless something completely crazy happened that we have no clue of, that's the only thing that I think would make you worry and do something desperate or something so. Because, then it gets beyond just the accident. I talked to the guy who runs the Texas Park and Wildlife Communications Office, the chief press guy there a couple of days back. And, they don't believe, this is going to be hard for you to believe, I'm sure, but in Texas, they don't really assiduously investigate hunting accidents. It's like, well, it happens, and they come out. It's voluntary. The information you provide is voluntary.
I'm from Texas, David, and I am shocked.
I know you would be.
My one hunting experience, which was in Texas when I was in high school, it was a Sunday, so I couldn't get a license, so I didn't have a license, and a guy stopped us and looked for our licenses, and I was like cowering in the back of the truck, and God bless his soul, he had the decency not to come back and ask me. He knew exactly what was going on. Everybody else had a license, and he just.
And there's no and there's no real punishment for acting for having an accident. I mean, unless it crosses into criminal conduct. So then the only thing you can really worry about. Getting drunk and shooting someone is probably against the law, even in Texas.
Yeah.
But that is probably the only vulnerability that Cheney might have in a situation like this. I mean, making an honest, even a real boneheaded accident, hunting accident, a mistake in Texas, doesn't seem to, lead to any punishment or even pulling your license.
Yeah.
So it would only be if he, I think, drinking, and that would be the issue. And that's something that they could control.
My theory is, they said lunch was at 1. He says he had a beer. My theory is, and then they were out hunting by 3. My theory is, he had 2 or 3 beers at lunch, and that was maybe it. But he realized he wasn't, he had a little in his system.
Well, yeah. I mean, look what happened in D.C. They've lowered the alcohol level quite low here, and that one drink now. If you get stopped, I think within an hour of drinking for most people, you will be above the level. So I think again, I don't know what the law would state in Texas, but anything, if they had to give him a test and he had any alcohol content at the time, even if it was not above, say, the DWI level, which he would be familiar with, having gotten 2 TWIs in his past.
Does he really?
Yeah.
It's so good to have somebody on the show who actually does reporting. This is a revolution.
That came out at the time of the Bush DWI. I mean, Cheney had twice as many as Bush did.
That's a notable fact.
5 deferments, 2 DWIs. Those are the big stats on Cheney. And so, again, I think from a political perspective, not necessarily a legal liability issue, you get any level of alcohol in his blood, and then people can go to town on that.
Well, now that I know that, I'm amending my scenario. I don't think it was 2 or 3 beers at lunch. I think he did have the flask of wild turkey in the orange vest. I think he was juiced.
that could all be.
And I'm not going to rest until he's brought to justice. I don't know about you. That may be a lot of sleepless nights. Okay, given the fact that there are even more, equally important things going on in the world, maybe we should move on.
Well, yes, I mean, the White House does say it's time to move on to the priorities of America.
Out of deference for the Bush administration, let's talk about their plan to destabilize the government in Iran.
A good plan. Perhaps they should have tried it in Iraq first and tested it out.
They did destabilize the government in Iraq.
No, they didn't bother doing that. They got rid of it.
There was a brief period of instability before its extinction. But anyway, this is maybe destabilize the wrong word. They want to fuel pluralism in Iran. You might say, right?
I think there's actually a real deep dilemma here. you want to, everybody's for democracy, except in Algeria where they elect fundamentalists who then rip up the Constitution. But by and large, promoting democracy abroad is a good thing. But then again, maybe not so in Tibet where that would, alienate the Chinese. But by and large, we talk a good game about this. And then it comes to Iran. Now, it seems to me there might be competing interests here. One would be a sort of realpolitik diplomacy that tries to, over the course of the long run, make the leadership of Iran a little less nutty. Maybe a big challenge, but maybe something worth aiming at. And then, Bo, if you try, and you do that for the obvious reasons that there may not really be a method for stopping Iran from getting a nuclear device. You just, I don't think we have the troops to invade. Even 2 months ago, I was talking to Michael Ledeen, neocon at the at AEI, a big, hawk, who said that he didn't see a military solution to this situation. I said, well, my God, if he doesn't, well then, we're really up the creek without an invasion plan. And so if you can't, do it militarily, then you really have to sort of figure out what you can do politically, diplomatically, and it's really hard to come up with any scenario at the same time you're openly saying, we have $75 million, whoever overthrows your government. It doesn't work.
You mean because it only helps the leader rally support?
Yeah, well, first, if there is a pro-democracy movement there, it allows the government, whatever space they've managed to carve out, as narrow as that may be, or will be in the future, it allows the government to say, okay, you're just U.S.
You're American pawns, right?
Pawns, provocateurs, which is what Castro does all the time.
Right.
And it's and it sometimes makes life a lot more difficult for them, and and it also just increases the level of antagonism, which it's hard to make it higher than it is, but it will. A couple of weeks ago, I saw Bill Odom speak. He was the head of the National Security Agency in the Carter years, and he wrote a piece for the Neiman Fellowship newsletter in the fall, saying what's wrong with cutting and running. He actually believes in cutting and running would be the best thing to do in Iraq. And on the subject of Iran, he said, wait a second. They're as entitled to nuclear weapons as much as anybody. What he would do is say, hey, we can't really stop it, so let's try to find some strategic, détente is too big a word, some strategic modus vivendi that we can come in with them and say, listen, give us a break in Israel. We won't, push you too hard on nukes, and let's all, make a lot of money in the oil business. And that may be the best way to go. I mean, I don't think we can do anything militarily. Do you?
Military option doesn't seem attractive to me. I do worry about just kind of more and more nations of less than complete stability and less than complete allegiance to the American cause getting nuclear weapons, because there is some chance that they'll wind up in the hands of terrorists, which I think is the great threat of the future, as a lot of people do,
right?
Along with biological weapons. I personally think that sometime pretty soon, some politician who's a real visionary on arms control better show up and find a way to convince the American people that we need to think in very bold terms. I'm not sure even that you could put together in a short enough time span to handle Iran, but I think it makes sense for America itself to make significant sacrifices on that front, and certainly for the Bush administration to do what are really easy things, like say, okay, we've rethought this test ban treaty thing, and we're getting back on that bus.
So you mean for the U.S. to get the moral high ground here, to sort of give up some of its nuclear arsenal?
I mean, look, if Iran's going to sign on to something, they're going to have to be able to show their people that they got something. And the prizes for them would be, like, get America to backtrack and get Israel to do something. I think you can imagine Israel doing something on arms control that would be less than giving up all their weapons, that might still be viewed as a triumph by whatever leader could claim credit for extracting the concession. But this is a big subject, and you would have to think in visionary terms. But I certainly think in the long run, America is going to have to put up with monitoring to get the kind of monitoring we're going to want in all countries. That's not to say we'll have to give up all our weapons, but we'll have to at least say, sure, our word should be, everyone should be verified and not just trusted. That includes us. And you can imagine something like that with Israel. But I certainly think it's going to take something that grand to lure a guy like the president of Iran into some truly invasive arms control inspection system, which is the only thing I'd be satisfied with. And even that might not work. I don't know.
Yeah, it may just be a matter that we have to buy time.
Hope for a better regime. But I do think in the long run, the world has got to get better at accounting for this stuff and policing it. But
now, let me interrupt here because viewers may know that this is the first time I'm doing this, and I just want to let you know, Bob, that as I'm watching the program here on the computer, it is making dividing this up into individual 10-minute long clips. Now, whether I can put them all together to make a continuous movie, I suspect I can, but I've never done it before.
Well, it's part of the mystery of Blogging Heads TV, and it's part of the thrill, you know.
Well, so just so you know, hopefully this is not too
so there have been two of those created now, right?
Well, now we're on to our third.
You know, that's a good way to tell us when we should move on to another subject.
Maybe we'll even put commercials in there for us.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll tend to that later. I'm confident that we can do something.
Okay.
It may not be successful, but it'll be something. You have any thoughts on Hamas? Just because there was, earlier this week, there was a story in the New York Times claiming that America had a plan in conjunction with Israel, or at least was seriously entertaining a plan to destabilize Hamas. My view was, in a way, that wasn't all that different from what America had already officially said was its...
Exactly. In fact, I heard Steve Erlanger, the New York Times reporter, who did that piece, who's a good reporter, on NPR... I believe it was NPR after the day the piece came out, because the White House or the State Department sort of said there's no plan, and he said, well, wait a second, you made your point, Bob. You know, if you just look at the public statements, that's more or less what people have said.
Right.
And it's a way of, it's certainly brinkmanship, because right now, if I have this right, the Israelis collect the taxes and more the custom duties that are due the Palestinian Authority, and if they don't turn that over, automatically, as soon as Hamas, moves in, the Palestinian Authority will have $1 billion debt, and we'll have no money. We'll have no.
And a pretty major grievance, right? Because that money, it seems to me, that money is much easier for them to claim their legitimate due than the aid they get from because that's really kind of their money, right? I mean, I don't know the details of this tax collection system. Do you know?
No, but I assume it's like customs and duties, and they come in and out of ports, and the Israelis keep track of it, and they say at the end of the day, end of the month, here's your check.
Yeah, I thought the idea had been these are Palestinian taxes. It's just that as a practical matter, Israel is in charge of collecting them. So if they withhold those.
Yeah, they said they'll put them in escrow. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier about democracy.
Right.
Now listen, I'm not happy that Hamas wins and that and their terrorist side. But if you're going to say to people, you get to choose your leadership, and they choose leaders like that, well then where are you left?
Yeah, and then Egypt postpones elections, and we don't do much of anything about it. Certainly, don't try to apply any hardcore pressure. I was, in retrospect, I guess, naively optimistic that Hamas's ascent to power might lead to something good, because then at least you're dealing with the people who can control the violence. And I also thought a position of legitimate leadership can often have a moderating effect on a group. What I was naive about, I think, was not either of those things. But in thinking that the current Israel government would see things my way and try to use that opportunity in that way, rather than basically, use it as a reason to cut off relations altogether and try to destabilize Hamas, which I guess is what's going to happen unless America dissuades them, which doesn't seem to be in the cards.
I'm not sure how this would have worked, but imagine, if you will, a situation: Hamas wins, and the Israeli leadership, whether it's Sharon or who's available or not, says, listen, we're very worried and troubled and not happy with these results, but we still got to live together, and we're inviting the Hamas leaders to meet with us tomorrow. We know what they've said in the past. Nope, we're not going to set any preconditions. We're willing, if they want to engage in war against us, we're willing to fight hard, but we're also willing now, at this point in time, to see if we can make a break. And we're going to all you Palestinians out there listening, you just elected these guys. Tell them that you'd rather have peace than warfare, and let's see if we can, make some progress here. I mean, that may be naive, maybe too idealistic, maybe too hard to do given the history and given Hamas's, position that they don't believe in the existence of Israel. But boy, that certainly would have given Israel a free hand to do a lot if Hamas didn't, take them up on that offer.
That's a good point. I mean, unfortunately, Sharon is one of the few people who could have gotten away with it politically in Israel, probably. Mm-hmm. Or certainly he was better positioned than his successor, on the kind of Nixon goes to China theory. But I also just kind of think that I think what we should have done was looked for a formulation. I mean, to ask Hamas to unconditionally recognize Israel is crazy. They can't turn around on a dime like that. That's just not going to happen.
Never mind. 30 years, never
30
mind.
years of commitment to a cause. Forget it. It did seem to me conceivable. And if you listen to the things they were saying right after the election, they were very careful not to repeat their traditional unconditional rejection of Israel's right to exist.
Right.
But whenever anybody asked them, they started throwing in conditions. They always said, well, if this and if that. But nobody in the West, well, certainly not America or Israel, picked up on that and tried to box them in even to a highly conditional formulation. In other words, suppose, that you were going to, you define right of return vaguely. Because these are the kinds of things they were listing.
Right.
You say every Palestinian is entitled to right of return or just compensation in its stead. And Jerusalem is, the capital of Palestine. And, a lot of people imagine a big chunk of East Jerusalem being that in the future. So I just think you could have been very vague and gotten them to at least sign on to a conditional form of recognition, highly conditional even, that would have permitted dialogue to go on. And I personally think once they're running a country and they're going and being recognized internationally, these guys can change quite a bit.
Well, that's actually the Bob Kagan argument. Interestingly enough,
wow.
In a certain sense, the neo after the election, I heard him on radio, and this has come up in the past. Well, Mr. Kagan, what do you think about democracy now? And the argument has been that if you give people a legitimate course for their grievances, for their actions, they will tend to be less crazy or extreme, however you want to put it. Now, there are, the counter-argument is that there is fundamentalism out there that is not caused by the lack of access to a ballot. And thus, people may not moderate. We don't know. All we can do in the situation of Palestine now is really hope. And if the Israelis had given them any margin of opening, and Hamas had thought that this was a moment to take it, it would have been at least an implicit. If they sit down at the same table with them, or even wave at them from across a room, it's an implicit recognition that if not, that's a step towards recognizing the existence and actually talking about real things. And it's clear.
Well, their fear domestically was of Netanyahu on the right, I guess. Like I said, I think Sharon might have been able to get away with it. But, a lot of politicians are noted for courage. It would have, magnanimous gestures are often overlooked in international affairs, it seems to me. And they can actually work. But, quickly, there's this UN Guantanamo report. Now, I haven't read it. I don't think you've read it. I don't think either of us has read much of the coverage about it. And on a lot of shows, that would end discussion right there. But this isn't the kind of show that is. Ignorance has never stood in our way. I have just a somewhat related thing to say. The UN report apparently said, look, basically what's going on in Guantanamo amounts to torture or violations of human rights in some other sense or something like that. That's the gist of it, I gather. My view is that strictly speaking, even if that's not the reason we should close it, the reason we should close it is because that is so much the perception out there, and increasingly perceptions are vital to national security because so many of the threats to America originate in grassroots opinion, more than they used to, because that's what fuels terrorism and so on. So you have to worry more and more about what people think of you. Guantanamo is not good PR. And more than that, we just live in an age, and we just need to keep this in mind, where just about everything gets documented I mean, I turned on the radio this morning, and the BBC was interviewing a guy who was in Guantanamo for 2 years, British guy, and he's writing a book about it. I turned on CNN in the afternoon, and there's like a movie about Guantanamo based on the experiences of some guys who were there. I mean, that's just the way the world is. It's like in an age of digital cameras and emailed pictures, there was no way Abu Ghraib was going to remain hidden. And you have to take this into account, it seems to me, in deciding what you are and aren't going to do. You know, it's
we have more Abu Ghraib pictures that came out yesterday. The Australian Broadcast Service put them out, and we had the British video, which I guess is about a year and a half old now, from Basra beating people. We had that footage. I don't know if it was at CNN originally. It was news footage of an American soldier killing somebody. Look at the cartoon episode. Inflamed, of course, but it shows you the power of an idea, of an image, and how far it can go, and how a gigantic enterprise such as an invasion and occupation of a medium-sized country can really go to crap just because a couple of guys do something stupid in a prison and they have a digital camera, which is why, in some ways, a certain amount of modesty and humility may help us in this new century, which is exactly the opposite position of the Bush White House, which is we make reality, we define it, we have the power. It's the hubris that others have talked about, and you can be right as much as you like. But if that being right ends up, causing more problems to, Americans traveling abroad or to troops, in the line of fire in places like Iraq, being right doesn't really provide that much consolation. And same thing with the military tribunals that they were talking about.
Yeah.
And even when you talk about the wiretapping business that comes up, the warrantless wiretapping, they can make all the fancy pants legal arguments that they accuse liberals of making when they don't like what they're doing. But at the same time, if you just sort of big picture it, they could have gotten this with the Patriot Act. They could, there's no reason, how you go about doing things, as my wife often tells me, is just as important as whether you're right or wrong in doing them. And that's just a lesson that the Bush administration seems to not ignore, but to purposefully reject.
Yeah, no, they're outraged that the wiretapping story came out. But again, I think in the modern world, you have to assume more or less everything is going to come out. And if that's going to be a disaster for you, don't do it in the first place. It gets into all kinds of realms. It's like, who was it, Frank Gifford, who was lured into some extramarital affair, and it turns out that there were pictures being surreptitiously taken. I mean, it's just...
I never forget that.
What?
I never forget that.
I haven't seen the video. I'd love to. I mean, not of the act itself, of like what he said to her when he first got her in the hotel room or what. Have you actually seen the video?
No, but I remember there were pictures of video. There were some blue dress type of situation.
We'll have to share that with our viewers at some point. But anyway, I mean, life is more and more invasively documented, and you're right.
Oh, listen, and whoever thought that pictures in a small Danish magazine would become front page news, in Egypt, Morocco, Indonesia, Lebanon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's not everything's documented, but then everything gets zapped around like we're zapping the digitalized information that we're recording right here, and it becomes very easy to if something has resonance.
Yeah.
It becomes very easy to get in front of people and have an impact.
Yeah.
So as my grandmother might have said, you really have to mind your P's and Q's.
I'm with you. I'm with your grandmother. And which does lead us finally to the cartoon thing. Do you have a view on the question of whether this Danish editor should be condemned or praised or something in between?
Not praised. I mean, I understand, the First Amendment, it's not First Amendment, it's in Denmark, but the free expression issue, and I understand that, but I would say that you also don't have to go out of your way to be provocative. You don't have to, you have the right to metaphorically poke someone in the eye with a sharp stick, but you don't have to do that, and being sensitive, the right has defined being sensitive as being politically correct. And I think that's just bogus. Being sensitive sometimes is just good manners. And if you know a particular religion doesn't like to see its holy figures, cast in imagery, whether or not it's in the Quran or whether it became a later teaching, you don't have to do that. Now, you have the right to do it, and if it's important, you can do it. Yeah. But just to make a point, and then at the same time, the guys who made an issue out of it, the Muslim clerics, to me, yeah, it's right. It shows there's anti-Muslim sentiment. Any Christian right-wing leader here, if you did a picture like that with Jesus, they'd call you anti-Christian.
Yeah.
And they have the right to complain, but at the same point, I wish they would have just shrugged it off more, just not led to riots. What do you think?
I'm actually in favor of condemning the guy, and it took me a while to come to that realization. And actually, it was this show that helped me do it. A series of arguments with Mickey, and actually these have culminated in an op-ed piece that, as things stand now, will show up in the New York Times tomorrow. This is the first printed byproduct of Blogging Heads TV, I guess. It was just, I kept throwing these arguments out there. It started out with me just saying, I don't think that the Muslims, that this reaction is as alien as people are treating it. When you look at what's going on, and when you look at the way, America, internally, we actually do a certain amount of self-censorship on sensitive issues. Anyway, Mickey kept knocking these arguments down, and I finally convinced myself, after we had had a couple of these arguments, that there was a coherent argument I could lay out, and so for better or worse, I did. And unless that piece is supplanted by some breaking news type op-ed, it'll be there in the paper tomorrow, and I will link to it.
Well, I hear that Cheney has submitted an op-ed, Why I'm Giving Up Hunting.
Well, I'll tell you, I would gladly yield.
Yeah.
I would prefer, why I'm giving up politics, but
that's
it's a start. If he's going to give up, giving up one mercenary activity could lead to giving up another one.
Right.
Well, listen, we've gone on a while.
Yes, we have.
This has been great. Maybe you and I agree on too much.
Well, we'll pick some more contentious issues next time.
Yeah, we can talk about sports or something next time.
Yeah, Britney Spears.
But and I hope you can glue those video files together, and if so, then this will be on the air before too long.
I'm going to try as soon as we finish.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next time then.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Bye-bye.